So here it is. You've got an empty church. Your team, your band, they're showing up. They're going to play to an empty room. You're going to capture it, turn around and put it on the stream. You're going to do it live. First thing I want you to know is live doesn't have to mean live. So know that. You can record the day before and put some production and energy into it to really make it sparkle and then broadcast it live the next day. That is okay. But whatever the case, here you are. What's the first step? You've got your stream set up. There's tons of videos that can help you do that and pick out the right hardware, software, which technology, which platform to go to. I'm not here to talk to you about any of that. I'm here to help you get the mix that you need from point A, which is the stage, into the stream, which is somebody's living room. And there's big differences between mix in front of house and a live stream, and we're going to go over them. So the first step, understanding that what you hear in the room is not necessarily what is in the box of live stream. Front of house, you get to cheat in a way because there's an original sound source to compare to amplify. For example, there's an instrument on the stage that's playing. You can go down there within, perceivable ear level, mute your house, listen to that instrument's natural sounds, turn your house on and EQ it to match so that it's identical, and there you go. You've got a great sound. You do that with the whole mix, there you go, you've got a great mix. Well, streaming is a little bit different because that box is empty. You don't have a reference point to start with to amplify off of. That is the number one challenge that you have in terms of what's different. Now, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to identify what your mix really sounds like if you were trying to mix it in the same room as your live play. You go to a recording studio and they've got the band in one room playing, and then they have a control room somewhere else where everybody's listening. You need to create that same environment. And I know that we don't necessarily have time, resources, or energy to go make a recording studio, but you need to do your best to remove yourself from that environment so that you can hear what's happening in the box. If you're standing in a room full of noise and it's going, and you put some headphones on, you can still hear the noise, especially the lower frequencies. They're hitting you, and you're absorbing them through your skin. Those wavelengths are hitting you. And there's nothing you can do to teach or trick your mind into not listening to the exposure that it's being impacted by. But it's real simple to leave that space and to go somewhere else. So a real world example. You're a church, you got a limited budget, you aren't really spending, you're not buying extra stuff to make this happen. You're using what you've got, you're making do, and you've got a front of house console as like the X32, super common in churches. So X32 is running, it's in the sanctuary. What should you do? Go grab yourself a pair of monitors, pair of headphones, both, and a Bluetooth speaker. And grab the iPad that you control the X32 with. Go find an empty room. Maybe it's a janitor's closet. It doesn't really matter what it is. Of course, the more neutral the acoustics, the better. Again, you're trying to emulate that recording studio. So a nice room that's got a flat or the flattest response you can find. Set up your monitors. Set it up so that you can hear the stream. Turn the stream on, of course, in private mode. You don't want to be broadcasting this to the world. And listen to it in there. Hear what you've got. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, wow, this sounds so much different than in my sanctuary. Yeah, it does. And this is what everyone else is going to hear. What you need to be doing is mixing this. So now you've got the iPad out. You can make your adjustments. You can't solo channels, which is a real bummer, but you can mix, and you can get the mix. Now, you might find yourself, especially if you're a one-man show, from the sound tech side of things, running back and forth. But if you're going to be mixing and you're going to be taking it seriously, you've got to remove yourself from that sanctuary so that you can hear the actual mix. Okay, so now let's say that you can't do that. You're stuck to confines of the sanctuary itself in that room. You got to do your very best to isolate as much as possible. The plexiglass riser, or not a riser, but the plexiglass for the drums, put that up around you. One thing that I have done in the past is I take my earmuffs from the gun range, and I got my in-ears. I push my in-ears in all the way, and I put the isolators over the top of them. Now I've got the highest degree of sound isolation that I own. And my head is isolated as much as possible, but those waves are still hitting me. And so what I find myself doing is basically the impractical, it's not impossible, but very impractical level of mixing, and it just doesn't work. What you're going to have to do is find someone else. You're going to have to get a team going on where you can have somebody who's not in that room monitoring that mix, and either A, giving you feedback, or B, mixing it themselves. So it might be like a phone call type of a thing where they're telling you, okay, you can't hear the drums. Okay, that's too much drums. Okay, back and forth. This is the engineering side. Okay, so that's challenge number one. You have to figure out how to overcome it. You just do. That's part of the requirements. You can imagine that when something is being live broadcast, there's the van in the back, and there's the engineers sitting in the van that are doing all the mixing, and they got the snakes running the sound out to the van. That's what you're emulating. That's the you have to create that some way, somehow, inside of the scope of what you have available. The other piece that is very, very different is the production side. There isn't anyone in the church anymore. So your team, and this includes the preaching, is preaching to nothing. It's preaching to thin air because there's nobody there. It's very different. The dynamic, the action, the excitement, the energy goes away. And you need production to help bring it back. So let's talk about the band side of it. In normal church scenario, my experience that I've seen is the person responsible for the production is really the worship leader, and the worship leader's up on the stage playing music. In this situation with the live streaming, that is not a good plan. That person is up there. They need to be focusing on playing the music. They can't be focusing on putting on the production in the sense of getting everything together, making it as real as possible, even though there's no one in the room. So you as the sound person might have a new duty where you need to step up and fill some, if not all, of that role. This part requires you to be in the room. So you're helping the members of your band and your team feel like they're doing something that is beyond rehearsal. Because it's empty in there, it's naturally the mind goes to, we're just rehearsing. But then we're rehearsing with these cameras in our faces, so our nerves are kind of high. It's a bad mindset to be in. And it doesn't come across as real. So you've got to get in there, and there has to be production that's run. It's like managing a sports team. You got to get everybody playing together. Egos aside. So how do you do that and mix at the same time when you shouldn't even be mixing in that room? Well, really, it boils down to it's a lot easier if you have a team. But let's say you don't have a team, you're going to be doing a lot of running back and forth. And honestly, the simplest way to resolve that running back and forth is if you are pre-recording ahead of time. Because now you have post-production time where you're not relying on your rehearsal to get the EQs right, for example. So consider that. Consider that to be a real strategy that you might employ. Okay, so now you've got the production figured out. The team is playing their music. You feel like that they are, on top of their game. Everything's going pretty good. And then you listen to your stream and it's just not what you want it to be. It might be acceptable to a certain degree, but it's not. Let's just put it this way. You're not proud of it yet. So what do? I'm going to suggest that you should look at the drums. Most likely, if that's the situation that you're in right now, if you hone in on the drums in your mix, you are not going to be happy with them. So I would stop, take a pause, and realize that, okay, I've got some work to do. Now, before you can even get into drums, we got to talk about miking the room, the original organic dynamic of your church service. Now, your goal is to bring that into living rooms. And so you want it to be as close to the original church service that you would normally have as you can possibly get it. And so a huge piece of that is the sound of the room itself, and the natural acoustics that create your church sound. You need to capture that. You have to have room mics going. Where you place them, how you place them, that's a trial and error. You move them around till you get it, till you like it. But what you need to know about room mics is that they should sound very good. Now, too many times I pull up a solo room mic channel and it just sounds like blah. Like, what is going on here? Why do you even have this? And the response I get is, it's just a room mic. We're not too worried about it. Okay. I want to tell you that you need to change that mindset if that's the mindset that you have. That room mic makes the church sound that I was just describing. When you listen to that channel isolated in itself, you should hear the room, and it should sound good. It should sound like you'd expect the church to sound. And of course, you're not going to have the clarity of a particular piece or part because you're picking up all of that natural reverb and decay, even echo of your room, but it should still sound very, very good, to the point where you could listen to it and be just fine. It should sound like the mix, because it is the room's mix. And if there's something missing in that mix, fix the room first before you even dive into your drums. Like, oh, well, actually, we don't even have the mains on because why would we run them? We need to run them because you're trying to create that event, that moment. The more realistic you can make it, the better. So run your house. Absolutely run your house. And then capture it with the room mics. Okay, so you've done that. You've got your room mics up and going, and they sound like the room. You've got them placed where you like them. They're EQ'd out to a point where you are happy with them. Now turn on the compression and get them going to where they're hot enough that they'll stay in the mix. It's It's really important because imagine a live stream again. It's an empty box that you're going to fill up. Well, you want that foundation, which is your room mics, to be that church sound. You don't want it to be coming in and out of your mix. So compress them up enough to where you feel confident they're going to stick around the entire time. Okay, and you're going to be using this for your preaching too. Maybe not as much, maybe not quite as detrimental as with the music portion, but it's still very important. Okay, so your room mics are up. It's time to add those drums. I want to tell you right now, you're going to have a hard time finding the time to get your drums rolling inside of your rehearsal space. They should be set up before the rehearsal time. You should have your drummer come in and start banging on them until you're happy with how they sound. They should sound excellent coming out of that stream. And if they don't sound excellent, you're not there yet. What's it take to get drums sounding excellent? It's really time, is what it is. And if you're good at it, it'll take you less time. If you're not so good, you're learning, this is a new experience for you. You didn't really have to mic the drums before because they were already loud in your mix. You might have had a couple mics on them, but you weren't really using them. Certainly not using them in the sense that you have to now. It's just going to take time. Get somebody on that kick. They're pounding away at the kick. Start EQing until it sounds like that natural kick in the room. Move your mic around until you like it. It's just trial and error. It's not rocket science. It's not something that's overly difficult. You don't have to be in a studio to get it. It's just time. So, the kick is the first example. You move to the snare, move to the rest of the drums, get them up and rocking. If you don't have a ton of drum mics, that's okay. A kick, a snare, and 2 overheads does very, very well. There are many, many recordings where that's all that they used in prominent music. So don't worry if you don't have your whole kit covered. You're okay. Just make sure that you take the time to use what you have and to really dial it in. That's the key to the whole thing, taking the time to dial it in. Again, if you're trying to do that during rehearsal space, it's just going to be frustrating for you and your team. They're going to want to be going over that song while you just want them to hit the kick. It's not the right application. It's similar to, consider you're about to go into a recording studio to record, your mindset's to go record, and you get there and, we got to set up the drums. And I tell you, at that recording studio, they're not going to set the drums up in 20 minutes. There's going to be time that's spent getting it dialed in. You have to do that. It's the difference. The box, again, when you stream, the box that you're capturing doesn't have those natural sounds as a baseline to go off of. It's empty. It only has what you give it through the microphones that you're using to capture. Okay, so let's dive right in. It's a little bit of a side note, but it's important. You don't want to be relying on your effects bus to sound live or real. The reason why I say that is your effects bus does not compare to the actual acoustics of your room. Use room mics to capture those acoustics. You can add some effects bus if you have to, want to, feel so inclined, but rely on the room mics first. You're going to have such a better sound that relates to your congregation like it's the real thing, because it is. It really is. It's not, setting number 12 on your effects rack. That doesn't sound quite the same. It's not so real. Okay, you're going to find that all of a sudden you don't have the level that you need coming out of your console. The reason why is your front of house console to um, amplifiers circuit is easy and simple. It doesn't take much to keep it happy. You can run a low level and still crank those amps up that you got and be okay. Maybe not necessarily right or perfect, but you could be okay and just fine. You go crank a low level over to your switch, it's eventually getting to your computer, and you end up with not enough level for someone to hear you. Your gain stage is far more important, far more critical doing the live streaming. And you're going to find that your gain knobs are all up higher than they used to be. It's possible that they should have been up the whole time and you're just now being exposed to that. But as you crank those up, you're going to find your signal to noise ratios come in and they start to become apparent. And so equipment that's noisy, equipment that's dirty, channels that are dirty, those hums, clicks, snap, crackle, pop is all of a sudden exposing itself inside of that box. Now, it might have always been there, but the reality was it's not really any louder in your house mix than when your AC turns on. And so you're just not really that concerned about it. No one's really noticed or brought it up. You don't have people complaining that, hey, I can hear that hiss in the house. Well, you have a noise floor in your sanctuary that is far louder than the noise floor coming out of a computer in a living room. So that coverage to hide the deficiencies just isn't there when you live stream. So you've got to go fix your system. You got to go replace those cables that are bad. You got to fix the hums. Any grounding issues that are popping up in your mix, you got to fix all that. You have to. And again, the rehearsal time is not the right time to be fixing that. You got to come in beforehand. Okay, so you've got mix. You're listening to it coming out of the console. You really like it. Now let's say you switch over to your stream and something's lost. Well, there's something in the chain that is coloring and possibly removing bits out of your mix. And you got to figure out what that is. For starters, use the very best cable that you've got coming out of your console to your live stream, whether it's your switch. There's many ways you can set it up, but what I'm working with most commonly is consoles going out XLR into a switch where there's a converter, it's putting it into the video, and then that's going out as one into a computer that's streaming to whatever streaming platform that you're using. Well, there's probably settings inside of that switch, inside of that hardware and that software that could be altering and affecting your sound. You need access to it. You need to get to know it. It's not too difficult. Just pull up the manuals on the equipment and figure out what the settings are, where they're located, and what you need them to be. For the most part, my opinion is you don't want to be doing too much sound manipulation post your console. You want it to be in the console itself. Now, if your console doesn't have the, let's say you're running analog, and so your effects, your compression, your limiters are all outboard, that's a little bit of a different conversation. But you still want that to be happening before you're going to digital conversion to get onto your platform. I would not be using manipulating tools inside of that digital side. I don't think that the quality would be there, um, unless you're using software that I'm not familiar with. Um, beyond the scope of what I'm experiencing day to day as I'm helping churches. So you find the color and then you fix it. It's in the same way. You know how when you have your front of house going for the first time, you got to ring the room up. You've got to EQ it. You've got to set your compression, your limiters up, your delays for your various speakers. So you got to do the same thing with your stream, and that's part of the. You don't have a room acoustics inside of your chain of events, but what you do have is conditioners that color your sound. So if your sound's coming out yellow out of your console and then it's kind of becoming a greenish in the converter, you want to adjust it back at the console to get it back to yellow. So you make those compensations ahead of time. It's just like ringing out a room. Now, when you're listening to your monitors, you want to have that room rung out too, so that you're as flat as possible there, in whatever capacity that is. If you're using real studio monitors, or headphones, or a combo of both. The piece I like to add is a Bluetooth speaker that just it represents the average listener experience. So if it sounds good in the monitors, it sounds good in the headphones, it sounds good in the Bluetooth speaker, it sounds good. So the next step is, well, how do I get it to great? Okay, so you've done all those things, and at this point, you're starting to get a mix that you're enjoying and liking. And you're realizing that the pieces that are missing now are really coming off the stage. What you're realizing is when somebody hits the wrong note, sings out of pitch, timing's off with the drums, it's so much more noticeable. And at first, you're interested to figure out, like, why am I noticing this so much more than I was before? The reason why is your box is empty without the sound when you're streaming. And so everything is amplified, everything is highlighted, and it's so much more. And so this goes back into the production part of what you do. You've got to help your team be a better team. You got to help them realize that, hey, when you hit that volume pedal and you make that change, we hear it. When you hit that wrong note, hey, make sure that you tune between every song. If your guitar is going out of tune a lot, or whatever that example is, hey, make sure you're really playing together. And you got to do it in a way. It's like managing a sports team. You got to get the whole team playing together, regardless of the situation, regardless of the stress, regardless of the fact that we're in the middle of this pandemic. There's so much going on the stage, and it all has to come together, and it will come together, and that's the exciting part. And I think that's for me, that's part of the accomplishment why I enjoy streaming as much as I do mixing front of house. Yes, the challenges are greater, but when you come to the end and you have a product you're excited about, there's so much love that went into it, it just means more. So there you go. Proceed with that and go make a great mix. All right.